And after class, he came up and he thanked her so much because he was a rancher from up north someplace, or a homesteader from up north, who had been teaching himself Latin and had just come down and wanted to check on some of the pronunciation. The cowboys helped strip the logs for the Rock Creek School, not because they were so interested in education, but because they knew they'd have teachers coming in. And I love meatloaf. I could never cook it on the ranch because you can do anything you want, but don't mess up the meat, and meatloaf is messing up the meat. Okay, schools. The Happy Flat was out here. They had the log one in town. They built the West Side High School. And I think it was only used for a high school for 4 years before the brick school was built in 22. And that's how I know there was a wooden flagpole in the middle of the road in 1922, because the picture shows the school under construction at the other end of Main Street.
So the middle of the road would have been between Claypoles and the Rainbow Room and the bank at that intersection.
And I remember what the big fuss they made when they put that metal one in. But I also, can you believe, I can close my eyes and run my hand around the wooden flagpole that was there. I must have gotten slivers or something.
Oh.
I was riding a bike and some way or another reached out and...
Ow.
Ow. But the high school here was built in 22 and my mother came to teach in 27. But there are really good records of who was there and what was there. The one class that she laughed about was the one that scared her. She was the only one on the faculty who had had Latin. And one of the students the year before had first year Latin from a teacher. And in order to get credit for the first year, he had to have a second year. So she was teaching this second year Latin class when a very nicely dressed, quiet man came in and asked if he could observe. And so she was there trying to, got through the class, and after class he came up and he thanked her so much because he was a rancher from up north someplace, or a homesteader from up north, who had been teaching himself Latin and had just come down and wanted to check on some of the pronunciation.
How you get to be an expert.
She was an expert fast.
So the Happy Flat Road now is where Agnes Mogan lives, but you are saying it belongs on the other side of the river?
Yeah. That whole flat, this whole flat was the Happy Flat. And there were ranches here before the homesteaders came in, but they didn't settle too much up in this area. They were more up on what looks like farming, but actually is grazing land.
North here or more up Rock Creek?
Up Rock Creek. I don't
Yeah.
think there were too many homesteaders right on Rock Creek, which may have had something to do with the fact that the ranches were pretty well established there.
Because isn't up there on Rock Creek, isn't that where N Bar N was?
Yeah.
And but it wasn't way up. It was closer to we did find one place, one riding someplace, that described the number of miles or so many rods from the mouth of Rock Creek that the Happy Flat School was. But another place that sort of described where the headquarters for the NBARN was. And it was down here, it wasn't way up north. The NBAR had another ranch up in the, I always want to say, is it the Cypress Hills or the Wood Mountain? It was Wood Mountain.
Oh, okay.
They had one there and then another one at Piermont south of Oswego. And all of the grazing down there was NBARN. And they had horse ranch on Snow Creek, which is close to the Mussel Shell down on the Missouri River. It was a big outfit. But for right here, it was the Cowboys, and I think it's in the Land Free that it says the Cowboys helped strip the logs for the Rock Creek School. Not because they were so interested in education, but because they knew they'd have teachers coming in. And most of the teachers married NBARN men.
That sounds like a cowboy's philosophy.
First things first.
So do you remember the dorm for the school?
Oh yes, that was in the... I don't think Mrs. Chester had that hotel at that time. Maybe she did. But the dorm was there. And I did see, I've gone through so much here just trying to find what things were interesting. But they gave the dorm, I want to say dorm monitor, whatever, there. And well, even when the dorm was not being held there, but when I was in school, there were many families who lived there. And they had an oil rig, or oil crew, went through it one time. And Polly Hedges, got that name, was in it, but her parents lived in one wing of the hotel with the family. There were brothers. I don't know how big the family was, but that was when I was in high school, I think.
And people were boarding in town when you were in high school, right?
Right. Well, Doris lived with us her senior year, and that was my 8th grade.
And Hazel Samuelson?
She wasn't going to school, but the dorm actually was operated. I do remember, though, Dick Baker wasn't in our class for a year or two because his mother had the job of dorm monitor up at Opine for a year. So the family went to school in Opine that year. But I do remember about the Chester Hotel, and I don't know what the connection with the school was. But the home ec girls in school ran, now you would call it a preschool. That wasn't what it was called then. Kindergarten, maybe?
Nursery school?
Nursery school, as part of their training. And I remember going over to that. Mostly because as a child you remember the very emotional moments of your life.
Was it very traumatic?
Very, very traumatic, and I fought with my husband years after over the same thing because they prepared our meals. And we had tomatoes, a little bowl of tomatoes, and they put sugar in mine. And I said, no, I want salt and pepper on mine. Eat it. And I ate it and I threw it up. But I remember that so clearly because I was so angry. And I married a man who wanted sugar on his tomatoes.
And this bowl of tomatoes was canned?
I don't know.
I'm thinking that the age of sitting down to bowls of canned tomatoes has passed. Right?
Although, you know, one of it, when Jan first came to live with us, her favorite breakfast was toast with canned tomatoes on top, and I love it.
It's just like a jam almost.
Hot.
Yeah, it is.
They were hot tomatoes.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure she always hated it, but for her, that was something that in her home had been easy to fix, and she could do it herself, and it was a touch of home, I'm sure, for her. But sugared tomatoes, and ironically, yesterday, I read in the Pioneer's Woman recipe book, meatloaf, and I love meatloaf. I could never cook it on the ranch because you can do anything you want, but don't mess up the meat, and meatloaf is messing up the meat. But she had what she called a tomato gravy. And so I decided, okay, I'll try it. And I made it. Love it. And it's made with ketchup and brown sugar.
Barbecue sauce.
Yeah, well, it has mustard in it too,
Yeah.
but it isn't a strong, it's just, I like it. Anyway,
Tomatoes and sugar.
if you if you live long enough, you will see the beauty in all things. Sugar and tomatoes. But they had that, and we must have done, I don't remember about activities in it, but I sure remember the tomatoes. And I also remember that I could go home all by myself, because you came out the back door of the...
School.
No, this is the back door of the hotel.
Oh,
Hotel, yeah. Came out the back door and just went around Westrom's, and my house was right there.
Nice little shortcut.
Well, at least I
and you
didn't
think
have
that
to
was sometime before school age? 4 or 5
Well,
years
I'm
old.
thinking 4 years old, but maybe 5.
So how old were you when you started school?
6.
What did you want to say about the West End? The Browns,
Was that the west
Hunters?
end of town, or was it the west end school, or?
Playing. I really wanted to, what the kids asked me the most is, what did you do?
Mm-hmm.
What did you play? And those are the things I can remember. But we would go down to that West End, and it had to be during the school year, because Ramona lived down there, and Darlene was usually around, and Agnes was usually around.
Did Darlene move into town for school?
They moved down.
Oh, yeah.
We spent went up there for the summers, and then, but they lived down here, so she was in town a lot of the time. In fact, I wonder, that picture of her 11th birthday is taken in front of the Chester Hotel, and I don't know why. But you see, Alma was in school when we were in grade school. And when Darlene was in high school, she had one of the 2 cars in high school. And hers was an old Model A that they'd fixed up so she could drive herself from here to here, which was not far. Jackie McLeod had the other one. And Jackie McLeod was living with Fred Myers. And Fred Myers had the place just north of the scale. But I think Jack's dad is buried in Hinsdale.
Jack McLeod.
Don't remember what his name was, but I know he had died, and he had sister whose mother was determined she was going to be a Hollywood movie star. And she could tap dance. She could, don't remember her first name, but Darlene had the second car in high school. When I finished high school, there were not many. And within about, well, by the time Joe finished, the high school boys started having cars of their own. And a lot of that was because they weren't making cars in the war. And I know Don's dad bought one of the first Chevys that came in and after the war.
Don Sheely.
Yeah. So that would have been when I was a junior or senior.